Mr. Speaker, to ask the Foreign Secretary if he will make a statement on the 20-year sentence imposed on our brave citizen, Jimmy Lai, a British citizen.
Welcome. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, may I thank the Right Honourable Member for his question on this very serious matter. He will know that the UK condemns in the strongest terms the politically motivated prosecution of British national Jimmy Lai. As the Foreign Secretary said this morning, 20 years is tantamount to a life sentence for a 78-year-old man. We remain deeply concerned for Mr. Lai's health. We call on the Hong Kong authorities to release him on humanitarian grounds so that he may be reunited with his family. Sadly, this sentence is not a surprise. The national security law was imposed on Hong Kong by Beijing precisely to silence China's critics. That is why the government has long called for the repeal of the national security law and for the end to the persecution of all individuals charged under it. It is also why the Prime Minister raised Jimmy Lai's case with President Xi on his recent visit to Beijing. The Prime Minister's visit allowed us to open up discussion with China, making our case directly to the Chinese President is an approach being taken by the USA, Canada, France, Ireland and many other allies. The Foreign Secretary has been in touch with Mr. Lai's family in relation to the private conversations that have happened, and I know that many in this House will want to express their support for the family. We recognise their fortitude at this incredibly difficult time. Mr. Speaker, this government remains steadfast in our support for the people of Hong Kong. That is also why today the Home Secretary has announced the expansion of eligibility for the B&O visa route. The UK has welcomed around 200,000 Hong Kongers since 2021, and we will unequivocally continue to uphold our commitments to them. This government's utmost priority is to secure the release of Jimmy Lai, an elderly, unwell British citizen. He has endured an extraordinary ordeal for 5 years, and we call for this to end now. That is why we are focusing on the action that will help him the most: sustained engagement with China, making our case consistently and directly. As the Right Honourable Member knows, we shouldn't sit outside the room refusing to engage where you can't even have that conversation. And I am grateful to have the opportunity today, Mr. Speaker, to reiterate this government's call for Jimmy Lai's immediate release.
Right, let's go back to Sir Iain.
I'm grateful for you granting this. Today, as the Minister said, Jimmy Lai, a British citizen, has been in prison for a further 20 years. Now, given his poor health and the fact that he sat for 5 years in solitary confinement, this is not a sentence, it is a death sentence on this brave man. They've trashed everything that we would consider reasonable in law. I, for example, as others, I was named 9 times in this prosecution case, and I've never even met him, or sadly, ever even spoken to him. I ask the question simply of the Minister. Why does the UK government statement they released today refer to Jimmy Lai as a British national? Lord Cameron finally changed that and made it clear that he was a British citizen. Yes. Can she not now say that she will now change that and call him a British citizen, which is what he is? And why does this constantly now refer me to Hong Kong and to the national security law? But the reality is that the British government has sanctioned absolutely nobody in the Chinese government for trashing the Sino-British agreement and now installing the Chinese national security law, which is the reason why Jimmy Lai has been arrested. And he has been convicted and sentenced for nothing more than standing up for freedom of speech and peaceful protesting for democracy. So I asked the Minister as well, Mr. Speaker. The government went on a visit to China recently, And they, before that, granted full planning permission for this huge and ghastly Chinese embassy in London.
They couldn't even get this.
At least, I say to the Minister, surely, why did they not hold back, if that's what they want to do, on that planning permission? So say to the Chinese government, you must release Jimmy Lai now and cancel this prosecution altogether. Otherwise, you will not get your Chinese embassy, instead of which we've given it to them free and for nothing, and the Prime Minister was treated like dirt while he was out there. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that Sebastian Lai and Claire Lai, children of Jimmy Lai, have fought for him, and I feel sorry for them, and my thoughts go to them. But surely, that indeed a sad day for anybody that believes in freedom, justice, the legitimate rule of democratic-made law, and now will the government call for a humanitarian parole.
Minister.
I thank the Right Honourable Member for his question. He may have missed my reference in my opening remarks to Jimmy Lai being a British citizen, but perhaps I can reiterate that again. And it is important to reiterate what also we have said today, which is that we call on the Hong Kong authorities to release Jimmy Lai immediately on humanitarian grounds so that he may be reunited with his family and for him to be receiving all the necessary medical treatment and for full access to independent medical professionals. The Right Honourable Member will also know that the Prime Minister raised Jimmy Lai's case with President Xi on the 29th of January in Beijing. And since the visit, the Foreign Secretary has been in contact with Mr Lai's family. The FCDO are also in close contact with Mr Lai's international legal team, Doughty Street Chambers, and his son and daughter, Sebastian and Claire. And the Foreign Secretary last met with Sebastian and Claire on the 8th of January. In relation to the Chinese embassy, national security is our first duty. The planning decision was taken independently by the Secretary of State for Housing, the conclusion of a process that he may remember began in 2018, when the then Foreign Secretary provided formal diplomatic consent for the plans. But it is also important to be saying today that we stand with the people of Hong Kong, and we will always honour the historic commitments made under the legally binding Sino-British Joint Declaration, and China must do the same.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Emily Fowler.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Jimmy Lai is 78. He has rotting teeth, he has diabetes, heart issues, and recently he's visibly been losing weight. And now he has been sentenced to 20 years. It is effectively not a life sentence, it's a death sentence. I would urge the Chinese authorities to end this elderly man's appalling ordeal, and I would ask that they exercise clemency and allow him to be reunited with his family. Does the Minister agree with me that the concern for the suffering of Jimmy Lai extends far beyond his family and touches the hearts of so many British people?
Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend, and indeed she makes a very powerful point, and she is absolutely right that the situation that Jimmy Lai is in and the urgency of the need to release him on humanitarian grounds so that he may be reunited with his family and receive the independent medical treatment that he must have is a matter that goes beyond his family and indeed touches the hearts, I know, of members across this House and across this country. He has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for peacefully exercising his right to freedom of expression. And my right honourable friend will know that his case remains a priority for this government and the Prime Minister.
Dame Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary.
I commend my right honourable friend for securing this really important, urgent question. Today, Jimmy Lai and the democracy and freedom he has campaigned for in Hong Kong has been sentenced to 20 years. As his son Sebastian has said, Jimmy dedicated his life to defending the freedoms of Hong Kong. For that heroism, he's being punished. He's essentially getting a death sentence for that. Jimmy is a hero and deserves to be back home with his family, not hauled in chains before the courts languishing in a prison cell. We call for his release. The fact that Jimmy Lai has been sentenced to 20 years, the longest sentence ever under the national security law, is not only a reflection of the cruelty inflicted by the Chinese Communist Party, but it's a monumental diplomatic failure of this feeble and gullible Prime Minister. Just over a week ago, he was with President Xi defending engagement with the CCP. He gave China permission for their super embassy spy hub, but failed to secure Jimmy's release. So can the Minister have some backbone now and tell us exactly what details were discussed between the Prime Minister and Xi? Did he call for Jimmy to come back home? Did he demand access to the healthcare he needs? The official readout of the meeting published from Downing Street on the website didn't even mention Jimmy Lai's name. So we need answers, Mr. Speaker. Jimmy's family and the whole country want to know when will this weak and pathetic Labour government finally stand up to China and show some backbone? And will the Foreign Secretary actually do something, such as summon the Chinese ambassador and prepare a list of diplomats to expel in response to China's refusal to free Jimmy Lai? Will the government revoke the planning permission granted for this embassy, the super embassy spy hub? Will China now be placed on the enhanced tier of furs at long last? And will the UK, holding the presidency of the UN Security Council, actually take some steps now and ask what diplomatic steps will be taken to escalate this case, put some pressure on China for once, and secure global support for Jimmy's release? Jimmy must be freed now. And I have to say, this is a day of shame for this weak Labour government and its failure to stand up for China.
Let me thank the Shadow Foreign Secretary for her comments, but to also say that she will know that this is a situation that has been ongoing before we were in government, and that we continue to seek the release of Jimmy Lai immediately. She will know that we assess Jimmy Lai's prosecution to be politically motivated. And she will know that in order to have the conversation with the Chinese government, you need to be in the same room. That's why the Prime Minister raised this on his visit, and we continue to raise this at every level of government and at every opportunity to do so. The Right Honourable Lady will also know that on the instruction of the Foreign Secretary, the British Consul General also attended the sentencing, and that we continue to keep in regular touch with the family. She will also know that we continue to do all that we can, publicly and privately, to secure the release of Jimmy Lai. And that is what we will continue to do so.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can see that the whole House is angered by this sentencing, but no one is more devastated than Jimmy Lai's family. Jimmy is a British citizen. There must be every single international pressure must be put on the Chinese government now to secure a humanitarian response to the situation we find. Can the Minister tell us how that we will be building an international coalition to restore that pressure to secure a humanitarian response?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her comments, and indeed for the work that she has done on behalf of her constituent. And I can confirm that we are in discussion with our allies, including the US and Australia and Canada and the EU, on doing what we can internationally to continue to advocate and secure the immediate release of Jimmy Lai.
Lisa Smart, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know that the whole House shares my horror and disgust at the politically motivated imprisonment, conviction and sentencing of Jimmy Lai. Last week, following his trip to Beijing, the Prime Minister suggested that he could change outcomes for Jimmy Lai and Hong Kongers by speaking softly with President Xi. It's clear now that the Prime Minister's trip to Beijing failed spectacularly to secure Mr Lai's release. Has the government summoned the Chinese ambassador to make clear this House's shared outrage? Jimmy Lai's experience is the most visible example in terms of Beijing's efforts to suppress any and all criticism of the CCP, but it is far from the only one. Pro-democracy Hong Kong activists living in the UK continue to face intimidation, repression and threats from Beijing. Could the Minister provide any guarantees to those Hong Kongers that they will not face further persecution or intimidation at the hands of the CCP?
Minister.
Thank the honourable member for her comments, and if I can also share that that we continue to raise Jimmy Lai's case publicly and privately with the Chinese government. And it is important also to note that in December, when we did summon the ambassador at the verdict, senior officials in the FCDO summoned the Chinese ambassador to condemn the development in the strongest terms. And there is a public readout of those representations made during that meeting. And what is continuing to be the case is that any attempt by any foreign state to intimidate or to harass or harm individuals in the United Kingdom will not be tolerated, and we have taken action to do more to support law enforcement and training in this country to make sure that that is the case.
Mr. Speaker, many of Jimmy Lai's family, including his son Sebastian, are my constituents. They are devastated by today's sentence that risks being a death sentence for a 78-year-old British citizen, a much longer sentence than any of the co-defendants and the longest ever under the national security law. Can the Minister reassure this House that it is the government's position that now this sham trial is over, that there are no more phony procedural reasons for us to work with our international allies to negotiate Jimmy's release?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend and indeed for the work he has done to support the family. And let me be clear that we see this as a politically motivated prosecution, and we believe, and we continue to state, that he should be released immediately. And we will continue to work directly with the Chinese government, raising our concerns and our views in public and in private, continue to engage closely with the family, and indeed continue to work with our allies, as I have already mentioned. And he will also know that this is a case that the Foreign Secretary has also discussed with Secretary Rubio, and officials are also in regular contact on the matter with the US government.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, many of us in this House were sanctioned by China, and the Prime Minister went over and managed to sell somehow the partial unsanctioning of a few of us as a victory. I would have welcomed a victory, which would have been the release of Jimmy Lai. But sadly, the Prime Minister conceded all of his cards before getting on the plane, leaving himself nothing to negotiate. Couldn't the Minister find anything else that maybe China wants that he could negotiate with? Maybe the Prime Minister could offer them the Isle of Wight or perhaps the Outer Hebrides. He's trying to give away everything else anyway, and at least the job of the Prime Minister would then be to protect a British citizen, and one who, as we all recognise, has now been given a death sentence by the Chinese, not the Hong Kong authorities.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps I can answer the substance of that question with a more serious response, which is that it was important to see progress that was made on lifting the ban of parliamentarians to be free to travel to China. And what the Prime Minister said last week is absolutely right, that there is more to do, and it is important to get clarity on how we move forward where those bans have not been lifted, and it is very important that we continue to see that progress. Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable member, I think, will perhaps disagree, but I think the key point is that you can't move forward unless you're in dialogue. And that is why what the Prime Minister did in going to China and in raising this directly has opened the doors to further conversation. And it is important to say that we continue to advocate for the release of Mr. Lai in public and in private, and that we remain in close contact with Mr. Lai's family on the steps that we are taking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's been pretty generous to the Chinese government. First the embassy, then the Prime Minister's visit to China, trade concessions, and in return the Chinese government have conferred a death sentence on Jimmy Lai. Will those responsible in Hong Kong, the administration judiciary that undertook this politically motivated sham trial, will they welcome in the United Kingdom, or will they be sanctioned?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he will know, in relation to what we have said, how important it is that we continue to see that what we have seen under the Sino-British Declaration is upheld, and that we expect those standards under the Declaration not just to be held in relation to those historic commitments by Britain, but that we expect China to do the same.
Stephen Gatton.
Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the Minister will be aware that there is cross-party consensus that we are horrified by the jailing of Jimmy Lai. But she'll also be aware that there are consequences when a UK government is perceived as being weak, and they have consequences for British citizens. Now, she said that the Prime Minister spoke softly. He also spoke ineffectively. So will she tell us what's next?
Perhaps I can just say again what I have shared with the House today, that in relation to the announcement today, that we continue to advocate for his release publicly and privately. We have not hidden our view over the imprisonment of Jimmy Lai. We have not hidden that we see this as politically motivated. We have said clearly and unequivocally that he should be released on humanitarian grounds. That remains a priority for this government, and it remains a priority for the Prime Minister, and he will know that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parallel to the terrible injustice inflicted on Jimmy Lai, my constituent Chloe Chung still has to live with a £100,000 bounty on her head. Her resolve has never been stronger. I spoke with her this weekend, despite knowing that anyone in the UK can claim that bounty.
Mr. Speaker, I will just reiterate again that what is the most important thing is that we focus on doing everything we can to secure the release of Jimmy Lai. That is our priority, and we will continue to raise this matter publicly and privately, and continue to be in close contact with the family on the steps that we're taking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister appears to have come to the Chamber today with absolutely nothing to say. The recent visit to China was an absolute disaster, where people took burner phones, we took a burner plane, we even appeared to take a burner Prime Minister. So, the Minister has recently said, earlier in the statement, she made reference to progress being made in these discussions. So can she outline exactly what progress has been made, and can she also outline what the response was from the Chinese government when the Prime Minister raised the case of Jimmy Lai with them directly?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's recent visit allowed us to open up discussion and dialogue directly with the Chinese government at the highest level. Something, it seems to me, that the party opposite have forgotten is actually quite important in having a discussion and dialogue, including on incredibly difficult issues with other governments. There is absolutely no point trying to call for something when you are shouting into a void. And they should know better, because it is much better to have a relationship that allows us to make our case directly to the Chinese president rather than talking to ourselves. And as the Prime Minister has said, the purpose of engaging is to seize the opportunities that open up as a result of engagement, but also to provide an opportunity for those discussions. If you sit outside the room, if you refuse to engage, you can't even have the conversation. And so I come back to the point that I have made a number of times in the chamber today, that we continue those discussions publicly and privately to secure the release of Jimmy Lai that is this government's priority.
Jim Shah.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister has heard me asking for interventions numerous times over the last number of years on behalf of British citizen Jimmy Lai, as others have in this House. Indeed, collectively we've been very strong. And now the sham trial has ended, and unsurprisingly, Jimmy will be held in unknown conditions for 20 years until he is 98 years of age, if he lives that long. Shameful. Denied his religious beliefs, no mass, and unable to worship his God as he so wishes to do. Mr. Speaker, this surely cannot be acceptable to this government, whose Prime Minister and Attorney General have been at the forefront of using human rights as a panacea for every decision. Are we truly in this House to believe that government abandonment of Hong Kong has meant there are not options for those who are British in Hong Kong and whose only crime is not agreeing with Beijing?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and indeed the honourable gentleman. He will also appreciate the importance of wanting to see progress in this case. He is right to actually see 20 years as the sentence, which is tantamount to a life sentence, or indeed has been said in this House, a death sentence, is unacceptable. That is why we continue to call for the release of Jimmy Lai, and it is important that we see that release on humanitarian grounds.
Right, that completes the urgent question. Let the front benches change over.